Dust 2 is more than just a map in a video game. Given the countless collective human hours spent inside of it, it feels closer to something like a real place. A place that I could probably draw a map of with a higher degree of accuracy than my childhood home. But what is it about this map that still resonates with people almost 25 years later? DE Dust and Dust 2 are not only great maps, they're relics of a renaissance in community contribution to video games. A time when the original Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, and Dota were all released within a few years of each other. It was a time of unbridled creativity among map makers and modders, when classics like CS Tire stood toe-to-toe with bizarre maps like DE Rats or The Simpsons House. When a teenager could cobble together a map like DE Cobble, and it would instantly be canonized into Counter-Strike's map rotation. Among the countless maps that emerged out of this period, the one that looms largest over the history of Counter-Strike is almost certainly Dust 2, which is why its humble origin story is so fascinating. So to tell that story in his own words, we tracked down the original designer, a man who hasn't worked in the games industry in over a decade. It's easy to assume that a map this legendary was designed by a seasoned veteran. But the story of Dust 2 begins before there was a DE Dust, before there was a Counter-Strike, before there was even a Half-Life. It begins with a kid named Dave Johnston making Wolfenstein 3D maps in his bedroom after school.
So I grew up in the 80s. My dad worked at British Telecom, a communications firm, UK, very big, and he was a software engineer. In the 80s and early 90s, he had a tendency to bring home computers, all kind of little 8-bit microprocessors, the simplest things. But I got into computers very, very early, and especially the Atari ST, which is where I learned most of my console computer skills when I was about 7, 8, 9, 10. Through that, I got into BBSs, and I discovered Wolfenstein, amongst other games on BBSs I played. So that was my first-ish 3D game I played, and I think I was hooked instantly. And these BBSs, they also included map editing tools. So I started my first map editing journey making Wolfenstein 3D maps, which was very similar to just playing Minesweeper. You just kind of click squares on screen to create walls or get rid of walls or create doors. And it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 that I discovered Doom for real. I managed to get a copy totally legitimately from a school friend. And again, I was obsessed with all the WODs I could download from BBSs, racking up the most enormous phone bill for my parents, who thankfully were very forgiving. And yeah, before I knew it, I was making Doom maps, and I think I released my first Doom map on the internet in 1997 or so. And at that time, Quake and Quake 2 had just come out one after the other, and so I was starting to try to move from Doom, which was 2D, much like making vector graphics, which again I've done on the Atari, to doing the full 3D work. And I remember my first attempt to do a 3D map in Quake was just impossible. I just couldn't do it. I thought, okay, just give up mapping now. Thankfully, I revisited it a few weeks or months later and tried again. I started to get the hang of it, started to make a few Quake maps just myself, never finished a single one. I just make 1 or 2 rooms here and there. At the same time, I got hooked onto Team Fortress, the original Quake World Team Fortress, and then Quake 2 CTF, and I was completely into the kind of playing mods and then trying to make maps of them. When Quake and Quake 2 came around, Ben Morris had designed another tool called Worldcraft. That was a paid-for thing. I couldn't afford it. I was just a 16-year-old. So I had to use other tools. So for Quake initially, I used Cruel and also the official Quakehead. Actually, Cruel was great. It worked really well, but it had limited 300 brushes. I think Dust ultimately had about 700, 800 brushes. So I couldn't have created a Dust-style map with Cruel. And then when Half-Life came around, it included Worldcraft for free because they basically hired Ben Morris to work on editing tools for them. And yeah, I mean, at the time, editing was all about creating brushes, which is just these big solid blocks in the world, trying to join them together to make sure players couldn't escape, texturing them appropriately. It wasn't a huge deal. Textures were flat. There's just diffuse textures. There's no like specular or shininess or even sound to them in some cases. There's just these big solid things. The sky was just a skybox. It's just a simple 6 pictures floating in the sky. And compiling on my, I think I had a Celeron 300 or something at the time, or even before that, a Pentium 2, 233, compiling a map the size of Dust took maybe an hour, 2 hours. So the iteration process was slow. But yeah, at the end, you got this beautifully lit map. I mean, by today's standards, so primitive. But back then, it was the most incredible thing, especially for someone who's come from Doom, which already seemed amazing at the time, and from Wolfenstein. Like, again, each step seems such an impressive improvement on the previous one. And then, of course, in 1998, was it? Half-Life came, and that kind of just changed everything. It came with free mapping tool, Worldcraft, which I already knew. There was new textures, there was always new functionality. And before I knew, I was hooked on making Half-Life maps. And then, a year after that, Counter-Strike came out. And yeah, that came with textures, and I was hooked on the game and started making my very first CS map, which was the World Tournament Retirement Home for Beta 3. And thankfully, it was deemed good enough to be accepted, and that led on to the whole Dust and Dust 2 and that entire journey. At the time, I was very familiar with the Half-Life textures, and I'd seen all the other Counter-Strike maps at the time, and most of them were very Half-Life-ish. They'd always kind of Half-Life-y textures, and to me it felt odd to be a terrorist or counter-terrorist in Half-Life. That didn't fit right. So when I saw this Sea Striker in the Beta 2, I was like, oh, what's new stuff I can build? I can build buildings and things that are more familiar to me rather than this science fiction Half-Life universe. I think I instantly transfixed with that red brick texture that was all over the Retirement Home map. That texture pack was just filled with urban textures that I felt I could use and be a bit more creative with. I wasn't so constrained by what I'd seen in Half-Life. When I was making Half-Life maps, I was trying to stick to the thing they'd established. But with Sea Structs, I had my freedom to do anything I wanted, really. There's no prior art. And that was really freeing. I didn't know where I was going when I started them. I had to make like a wall, then another wall, then a floor, a door maybe, and before I knew I had an entire map in front of me. This one just happened to look like a big old, like kind of say beat up building with a big courtyard, and yeah, just had the kind of oldish look to it that was very different to Half-Life.
So CS Tire ended up being incorporated into the third beta of Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were really young at the time, so I'm very curious what that was like for you.
Yeah, I must have been 15. I must have been 16 by then. So I'd finished all my exams from that summer. I just had the summer waiting to start sixth form here in the UK. So I just had time to play and do what I wanted. I didn't know Jess or Gooseman at the time. I was just a member of the CS mapping forum. I thought, I think this map might be good enough. I'm going to upload it and see what people think. Worst case, I get some critical comments and improve it. Best case, maybe they'll think about including it in the game. And I think by the next morning, I'd had a reply from Jess saying they wanted to include it in Beta 3, and they did some testing. I moved a long route from the CT spawn all the way to T spawn. And yeah, I don't think at the time I quite appreciated what just happened. There's a slightly weird map that I'd made, totally different to all the other maps in the game, that they somehow deemed acceptable to put in this little mod. I thought, okay, I'll take it. And then before I knew it, that map was being played. I was playing it online with other people, which was an amazing feeling. That's when Jess came back to me and said, hey, Dave, do you want to maybe make another map? We've got a texture artist you can work with, which was Chris McMahon-Ashton. And then that whole led on to the whole Dust thing, which some people may know about.
Okay, let's go.
When we talk about a map as iconic as Dust, it's easy to imagine that it's the product of some mythical map maker toiling away on their masterpiece. But the truth behind the map is far stranger and more interesting than that. It's the product of an impatient kid seeing early screenshots of Team Fortress 2.
I was a massive fan of the original Quake World's Team Fortress, and so when I found out that Valve had bought the Team Fortress team, I was excited. And so when I got retirement home into Counter-Strike. That was around the same sort of time that I think Valve released another tranche of screenshots of Team Fortress 2 at the time, and those were the ones that included this golden kind of beautiful lit world, very sort of sandy with a tank and some military marching through this environment. I thought, wow, that's okay. Now you've got my attention. I was so excited to play Team Fortress at that point. It suddenly solidified in my mind that was the next game I had to play. But of course, it was being delayed, and the release date was far out. So when Jess said, I've got Chris Ashton, got Magman, he's going to make some textures for you for another map. I was like, oh, okay, this is a perfect opportunity for me to try to replicate what I've seen in these Team Fortress 2 screenshots. And it was super cheeky of me. That was like such a... looking back, that's quite a horrible thing for me to have done, to try to replicate these screenshots and steal what the masters at Valve have been working on with map makers and texture artists. They've probably put so much time into those screenshots to make them perfect for release onto the web. And there's me, this old teenage guy from the UK, who's going to kind of come in and swoop in on their glory and try to make it myself. I circled in the screenshots the textures I wanted. He came back a few days later and said, "Here you are," and a few extra ones. And I started recreating those screenshots for myself, which is in a small area that represented the counter-terrorist spawn in D-Dust. That was all I had to work from, was that little area. But yeah, it was amazing to be able to get that area created and be able to walk around it and experience it and think, this is, I'm in TF2. I'm actually playing a game that hasn't been released yet. And it just felt so fun. In the past, when I was making Doom maps, I'd really enjoyed making maps of my school or my home, and just having that kind of freedom to explore in an environment that normally have freedom to explore was exhilarating. This was similar. I was able to explore an environment I'd seen in a screenshot that I wouldn't get to experience myself for a long time. I could do it today. I could now run around and see where it went. And then, of course, at that point, I ran out of screenshots because it only had like 5 screenshots of one area. So I had to work out, okay, I've now got the starter map. Jess and MacMan are now expecting me to make a map out of this. Where do I go from here? I knew Goose and Jess were trying to make a new game mode for Counter-Strike called Diffusion, where you had to plant a bomb one or two spots and the other team would have to defuse it. To me, I'd played a lot of CTF, so I thought these two were quite similar. So I thought, I know, I can make a CTF style map with these textures. I can do that. I started to extrapolate that initial CT spawn area out. I didn't know it was a CT spawn at that point. I just knew it as an area. I started thinking, okay, where could this go? And I then developed that area into an underground pit. And there's a little road that came out the front of CT spawn, then went left and down where the D-Dust underpass is now. That went down further into the underground pits. It's all very dark. I think it had a tomb or something down there, a few windows. I didn't know what I was doing. I think at this point I was really exploring the texture set I'd had, trying to work out what would work, what didn't work, and trying to establish a theme and a style for the map. When I did that underground bit, it did work, and decided that this map had to be above ground, had to be bright and colourful. I know I spent a lot of time with the underpass because it was a sort of design that I thought would be fun. I've played other CS maps. I've played Siege a lot and Assault a lot, and I think I was picking up little bits from those and trying to put them in here. I love being a sniper in Counter-Strike, so I thought this underpass would be a fun place to snipe. And then I thought, okay, I've got the sniper section. What about people who don't like to snipe? What about people who love shotguns, which is me the other 80% of the time. And so I created this sort of tight bit in the middle, these little corridors. And then the other side of the map, the T-spawn, again, I thought, okay, I need to tie this together somehow. And I just kind of tried to copy the style I got from the CT spawn, which I still didn't know was a CT spawn. It's just another area. It became the CT spawn. I just copied that style, wrapped it around, and once the entire map was sealed, and you couldn't fall out, couldn't escape, I then started to think about where these things could go. I think I already knew that the underpass would be a flag or bomb in the CT parlance, and the other bit on the other side would become a bomb spot, and then with either team either side. That seemed to make sense, and that was the map I presented to Jess, who then said, "Great, awesome, thank you." Put to testing, and then he came back and said, "Actually, could you move that bomb spot from the underpass to where the CT spawn. I thought, okay, sure. To me, that seemed really weird. But again, I'll trust judgment. And that was the version that shipped in beta 4. Yeah, and before I knew it, I was waking up. That must have been Saturday, Sunday morning, downloading beta 4 for the very first time, and finding tons and tons of servers playing D-Dust, and thinking, oh god, it's actually happened. People playing my map for real. Some are still playing with Time at Home, but most are playing Dust. And yeah, that's when things took off. The very first time I thought maybe I'd hit upon something good was when I saw a screenshot. I can't remember if I saw if it was in IRC or ICQ or even on the Counter-Strike website. There's a screenshot of them playing all the new maps net release, and at the bottom there's someone in chat saying, "Could we play the Dust map again?" And other people saying, "Yes, please, yeah, that one, I like that one." I was like, okay, people actually like this. And that's like the first kind of feedback I've seen from actual people playing these maps is amazing. And jumping into servers and knowing that I was the creator and just playing with them and be able to recreate these scenarios that I had played in my head when designing the underpass or designing the CT spawn a little bit, or thinking about all the crate placement I'd done to stop lines of sight being too long or interfering with each other, and just seeing those work in practice, I think it was mind-blowing. It's so satisfying and so unreal and weird that this thing was happening. But at the same time, I'm playing this first few hours of Dust and thinking, oh god, this timing is not right, or I'm getting to the CT, I'm getting to the middle bit too fast as a counter-terrorist, or too slow as a terrorist, or this thing, I'm getting caught on this and getting caught on that. Immediately I was already trying to find the flaws and see how it could be improved. And so that's why the subsequent betas 5, 6, and 6.5, there are always little changes to the map, like breaking walls, moving crates, making things brighter, darker, moving in the sunlight around, just trying to adjust these little circumstances that I'd either spotted or got caught in myself that are not fun to be in. For the first Dust, the main choke point was in those corridors in the middle. So I'd literally spawn from the frontmost spawn point of each team and run there. That's the shortest path I possibly could, and see. I'd have my watch, I'd be timing it and just seeing at what point, how far I could get before I could possibly see the emergence point of view of the team. And so I think for Dust that was around 11 seconds in most cases, and I did push those spawns back and forth over subsequent releases to get their balance just right.
Once this map is out there and it's popular and you're seeing screenshots of it and people talking about it, you're the person who made it, but in a sense now it belongs to the Counter-Strike community or something.
Yeah.
It must have felt very different to be working on the maps once they were out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I knew every small change I'd make would be breaking someone's strat that they would make in the next game, or could be introducing an issue for someone else. It was I did have a sense of it was ownership, also responsibility. It's like I was like somehow I was given these people an experience that they were enjoying. And that was, for my small 16-year-old head, that was mind-blowing. I was like, my head was exploding like this. And it's just incredible responsibility. But at the same time, I knew I had to make it better. I had to prove I knew what I was doing. I still felt like a bit of, I don't even belong. I was just, this boy had made a map and wasn't even not professional at all. I was complete amateur. But I knew that, I had to do things right now. I had to do things properly, do things as professionally as I could, and try to adhere to the standards I'd seen other mappers at the time extol. But at the same time, I was like so excited and so happy that this map had been received so well. I had no idea what would happen next. I didn't know if it's just a flash in the pan, if that'd be, if it's going to last more than a few days, weeks, months, years. I think I was just trying to enjoy it the best I could at the time and playing that version of the game and that version of the map as much as possible. Just really experience it and get the enjoyment that I was trying to put into it out again.
You alluded to this a little bit, but Dust was one of the first, maybe the first major defusal map. It's hard for people, I imagine, now who got into Counter-Strike later, especially, to decouple Counter-Strike from defusing a bomb. It's such an iconic part of playing Counter-Strike now. Could you talk about I'm not sure what the right question is here. Just what did you imagine that would be a big deal? Did it feel like that was an intriguing game mode to you? Did you feel like it would blow up? No, that's not a pun.
The original game title of Counter-Strike was Hostage Rescue, and at the time that felt It felt so revolutionary because all the other mods for Quake and Quake 2, even Half-Life at the time with like Science and Industry, they're all kind of CTF or variations of CTF, often with extra functionality like grappling hooks or super weapons and things. So Counter-Strike seemed fresh. I knew there were other mods like Action and Quake and Action Quake 2 and Action Half-Life even, but it also had a bit more creativity to them. But I think it's more interesting. You're having actual scientists at the time chasing you, coming after you to find freedom. So that was new, that was different, that was very unique to what it has from other games. So when Diffusion came along, again, that was a bit like CTF. You had two teams with the distinct objectives. That a little bit of a backward step, but at the same time it played more strongly into the Counter-Strike theme of terrorists, counter-terrorists. Of course, they're more likely to blow up things and steal a scientist here and there. So that made more sense. By the time Counter-Strike had reached retail, we all knew it was happening. So it wasn't such breaking news to me. I can't even remember if I went into a store and bought it, or I just bought it online. I don't know what I did. I'm pretty sure that Valve sent me at least one copy of it in the post. So I already had a copy. For it to reach retail, I had to hand over the rights to the map to Valve, which was unique in itself to be paid money for this thing I'd spent time on. That was possibly the more exciting and interesting and most unexpected thing about the whole affair. The thing appearing on shelves, that was just a logical consequence of being paid and the thing being successful. So I definitely really appreciated at the time quite how monumental that was. I think I do wish I'd spent more time at the time, like just appreciating this game I'd worked on. It's a cardboard box on a CD, in game or whatever. The local shop was at the time. I don't think I really sunk in back then.
If you didn't know the whole story of Dave's map-making journey, the unprecedented success of DE Dust might seem like the obvious high point. But while he was struggling to come to terms with the fact that lightning never strikes twice, those of us with 25 years of hindsight know that his biggest success was right around the corner.
So at this point I'd made Dust and I'd made Cobble, both of which were in Counter-Strike in rotation. So I'd established myself, I was pretty happy, but I think I was also pretty sure that I'm not going to get a third map into the game. That's ludicrous. Excluding Waterfall Darkname. A fourth map into the game, that would be ludicrous. So I started to toy around with making another Dust map. And I'm pretty sure between Dust and Dust 2, I had tried making new Dust-ish maps with the same texture set, and they just haven't got anywhere. I had to make a few walls, make a doorway, and you just kind of lose interest, move on to the next thing. For whatever reason, with the next Dust map, I found a scrap of paper, doodled a design, which I never did for any other map. All my previous maps, I just kind of winged it. I just made it up as I went along. For Dust 2, I just started designing something on paper. Thankfully, that design is one that I found the courage, maybe is the right word, to actually get into the computer and get it from start to finish it was a design that more or less roughly reflected what was on paper. There's some significant changes, especially to the CT spawn, I think. But the overall layout was more or less there. And I thought, okay, this design is completely different to Dust. It's completely different to Cobble. This is far too tight. It's a bit ugly in places. It's a bit too angular. It's got like sharp edges and sharp corners. It's got a spiral. It's got rocky bits. This is just silly. This is not a map that everyone's going to want to play who likes Dust or Cobble. And so I thought, okay, well, I've made it now. And around that sort of time, I had an email from Jayne Market from GameHelper.com. And he said, he wanted me to make a map for them. And I thought, well, I've got this Dust-ish map. He said, okay. And I think that's probably music to his. That's possibly the best thing you could possibly hear from me. I've got this Dust-style map. I did sort of tell Jess about it, and again, Jess said, send me a copy. So I sent him D Dust 3. Before it was released, I called it Dust 3, and he said this is great and suggested a bunch of changes to the bomb spots, again, just like Dust 1.
Do you remember where those original bomb spots were before the sites were A and B where they are now?
Yeah, so there's a tunnel called Suicide, I think now, in Dust 2, At the end of that tunnel, from the terror spawn, you jump down off the road, go through suicide. On the left, there's a doorway. In that doorway, there used to be a room, much like it's a very dark room. It's kind of similar to the underpass in Dust 1, and in there was a bomb spot. The other bomb spot was possibly on the right in the little dip along Long A, that weird dip that happens at the end of Long A for no apparent reason. I think it may have been there. I'm pretty sure I moved it around a few times, honestly, trying to find the right location. I do remember at the time, I had learned from Dust. I was trying to incorporate some Dust-ish elements, and the hallway was very similar to the hallway in Dust 1. So I was trying to incorporate some of that into Dust 2 without it being a direct copy. And that was always the hallway that I was going down with the shotgun in on SMG. That just appealed to me. I think at this point I had developed the sense that there are different play styles. People like to play different guns, different weapons. Long 8 is the part of the map that did not match my paper design, because by the time I got to adding that bit in Worldcraft, I'd run out of room. I was like, no space at all to create what I wanted to create. So I was squashed up against the very edge of the universe in Half-Life terms, and that area just became long as a result. So I think I was trying to make sure that there are no ridiculous lines of sight. There's no positions where a player could get in where they were drawing too much of that, because that would slow down their experience, that would drop their FPS. So I think I was more concerned about the FPS then performance than the actual gameplay. But that's also why it's quite tight, because I had to kind of go around and dog leg a little bit. But again, that area was, I would have preferred to push it out a bit more like the terrorist spawn in Dust 1, with those kind of balcony bits and kind of more stairs and things. But yeah, I was just squeezed. But I think this is one of those times where having a restriction actually forced you to be a bit more creative and find ways to work within those restrictions. And again, somehow, I squeezed in a little passage around from what would become the CT spawn through to the T spawn. I did have there was a pool, like a pond in Dust 2 at one point so just outside the CT spawn. That was creating bad sightlines and things. So I turned it into a solid wall instead. Yeah, there's always little things that just have the sense and sort of feel that these aren't quite right or aren't necessary. I need to pare them back or get rid of them, because Dust isn't a detailed map. That texture set doesn't lend itself to high fidelity detail. It's more blocky, and so I was trying to stick to that. So I always, the most valuable part to me when making a map was the first time I get to run around it in 3D and run around, jump around, crouch, do all the kind of maneuvers that I expect players to do. And that is the point where I'd always find sightlines that are incorrect or scary or weird or overpowered, or opportunities to add different defenses or offensive positions, to give opportunities to add like that break in the wall for the B bomb spot. Those were all me trying to think, okay, I'm in this position, what can I do from here, and what do I need to look for? How am I safe, how am I unsafe? And trying to make sure that every part of the map had some advantage, but also yet some disadvantage, and tried to balance those as best I could. It was mostly based on feel. Again, I'd run around and any other kind of not the kind of spider sense that this feels a bit wrong, a bit weird. Okay, why is that? What am I missing here? What needs to be changed, added, or removed to balance that discomfort in my head out? Just like when you're playing Counter-Strike Reveal, you're always kind of aware that enemies could come from, and what you can do from your position, where you can hide, what opportunities you have. Again, that pit, I think it was just me wanted to find a way to hide as a sniper and just duck in and try to pop out at people planting bombs and things. I think I was basically trying to play the map in my head at the same time as creating it and trying to cover all these bases. Yeah, that's the best way I think I can describe it.
I feel like if you were trying to design the most optimized, like, competitive play esports map, Mid Doors would be the first cut, because it's like you can get your head blown off just like setting up at the beginning of the match. Did you have a sense that Mid Doors was going to be like this lightning rod of controversy, or like?
Absolutely not. I had no idea whatsoever. I didn't even consider the fact that from the terror spawn you could see right down there. that's the sort of thing that normally I think I would like to think I'd spotted before I finish that. In that case, that one side line I did not spot, and so had I spotted that, maybe that those mid doors would have been different. Maybe I'd have shifted them across or lowered them or done something more creative there. But I knew there's a dust map. It needed some double doors somewhere, so it's some there and some for the bomb spot. I did not ever anticipate that the ones right in the very center of the map, where everyone's going to go to all the time, would cause such controversy and pain and suffering, and delight in some cases, but mostly pain and suffering. And those doors were, principally there just to stop people singing too much. I'm glad. I'm kind of glad they caused such controversy and fun and interesting skirmishes over the years. Again, I was never good enough at Counter-Strike to really appreciate all the straps and things that arise out of just small things in the map like that, or where the doors are this way or that way, or where a single crate can be. I was never that good or that aware. Comparing the Counter-Strike I was designing for in the late 90s to the Counter-Strike of today in 2024, it's like 25 years between those, and the strategies and approaches and the level that professional players have to think of now is like so many layers above what I was familiar with at the time. I was just thinking, can I make a shot? Can I jump from here to there without killing myself? Can I throw a grenade? Yeah, okay, that's fine. I was never, I never thought all the other things that could emerge out of these simple maps I was making.
Despite his initial concerns, Dave's follow-up to Dust went on to become the iconic Counter-Strike map, and by all accounts, one of the most famous video game maps in history. And nobody was more surprised by this fact than David Johnston himself.
It's hard to overstate the reach of Dust. I mean, like, Dust 2 has been recreated in every FPS imaginable that has map tools. There's like Minecraft mods that are Dust 2. It must be surreal for you. Like, what does that feel like? I feel like it would make me like dissociate. What does it feel like to watch this thing it must be like having a child go off on its own. Like, what is that like?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I see Dust in CSGO and CS2 these days, actually. I think, that's a really cool map. Yeah, I mean, that's good. I'm glad that's so successful. But I actually remind myself, that's my fault. I did that. I created. I set off. I planted that seed that's become this enormous thing that now hundreds of other professionals have poured thousands of hours and possibly millions of dollars into renovating over the years for different versions of the engine and versions of the game. To think that was all because of me sat in my parents' house on a crappy old Pentium 2233 trying to do something in my spare time. And Dust and Dustin and Cobble aren't my maps anymore. They're owned by the community and people who keep playing them and keep them alive and enjoy them and play them professionally. I'm not responsible for them anymore. That's also my relief. I don't need to worry about them. They're just taking care of themselves. It's nice. And I do wonder, how long they'll keep on going for. Will they still be played in like 10 years time, 50 years time?
Will they be on like a golden record shot into space someday, Put like Elvis Presley songs, Dust 2, all the high points of human culture. Yeah,
possibly. Or maybe people would be like, we've set up these things now, just banish them, the band. Luckily, Dust and Dust 2 anymore. Everyone's stuck with Mansion from now on. That's the map we're going to focus on.
But the story of Dust 2 begins before there was a DE Dust, before there was a
Counterfuck.
Before there was a Counterfuck, my favorite mod. It's a not safe for work mod. But the story of Dust 2, okay, I got this. But the story of Dust 2 begins before there was a DE Dust, before there was a Counter-Strike, before there was even a Half-Life. It begins with a kid named Jave Johnston. God fucking damn it.
Jave Johnston, purveyor of Counterfuck.
God damn it. He's the mod of Counterfuck. Jesus Christ. All right, hold on. God damn it.